Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. We can change our lives in very dramatic ways very quickly if we are willing to do the deep inner work, go within ourselves, and start to reprogram our subconscious mind. Our subconscious mind is so powerful. It controls 80 to 90% of all of our thoughts and energy output of our brains throughout the day. Think about all the things that your subconscious is doing for you on autopilot all throughout the day. It's keeping your heart beating. It's keeping all your hormones balanced. It's helping you move, walk, and eat without even really having to think about it. And it's also influencing so many of our thoughts and the patterns that we see within our own lives. Our subconscious informs our conscious mind, the stuff that we actively think about, which influences our emotions, which influences our actions, and then our actions shape the world around us. So when Carl Jung said that until we make the unconscious conscious, we call it fate, that's very true. We think that whatever's happening to us is just happening like it's out of our control, it's outside of us. And it's because we're not trying to go deep within ourselves and trying to figure out what's actually going on. Why do we hold these beliefs? And our subconscious mind formed all of these beliefs when we were very young, sometimes even before we knew how to communicate. It came from our relationships with our parents, our mother and our father in early life, our siblings, our communities, our neighborhoods, early school. And if we had traumatic experiences, or if we had unsafe experiences, or even just mildly negative experiences growing up, which most of us did have, all of that went into our subconscious, formed thought patterns, formed neural connections, and those neural connections got embedded so we continue to live patterns all throughout our lives. So if we are now adults and if we have repeatedly been in toxic relationships, that's a sign that our subconscious picked up these behaviors. If we're never making enough money, if we're constantly broke, if we have bad physical health, all of that has its roots in our subconscious. So it's not okay for people to say, you just need to be more disciplined or you just need to try harder. That's true, and that's a good thing to do when you're at a certain place. But even lower than that, we have to understand how our subconscious is impacting us, or else all the discipline, all of the effort in the world isn't really going to change our lives. And the language of the subconscious, how you reprogram it, is not something that was ever taught to us in school. It's not like anyone ever helped us know what to do about this, so it remains mostly hidden to us. But if we want to have good relationships, good careers, good bodies, good health, then we have to learn how to reprogram it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. The first thing we have to realize as we get down into reprogramming our subconscious is that our conscious mind, or our ego mind, evolved to keep us safe. It does not want us to go down there and access all of those difficult or dark memories or experiences that we have repressed. So it will do everything in its power to try to get us to not access that. As we start to reprogram our subconscious mind, we have to know that we're going to be met with a lot of resistance. And the resistance is also going to come from within us, but it's going to come from our conscious mind, or our ego mind. The ego evolved to protect us from all of these negative, bad experiences that happen to us throughout our lives. And you can see how this would probably be beneficial in a lot of ways. If we were stuck always worrying about, a time that we broke our leg, for example, and the pain of that, then we could get stuck there and we might not ever take any more risks or do anything else in our life. The conscious mind kind of tries to protect us. And I want to share an example that's on the extreme end of how the conscious mind does this. And then we can start to see how it does this in many different ways throughout our lives. This study comes from survivors of strokes who've had one half of their body paralyzed. And this is an interesting form of a paralysis and a stroke damage that's called anosognosia. And I probably didn't say that very well. But what happens in these studies is when these people have one half of their body paralyzed, the egoic mind, the conscious mind, comes up with all kinds of excuses for why they can't use the paralyzed side rather than just admitting that it's paralyzed. So in the studies, when these survivors of this injury are asked to pick up a pen. They can do it with the side of their body that's not injured. They can pick it up and they can write. But then when the doctor says, okay, can you please use your other hand to pick up the pen and write now? They'll come up with all kinds of reasons why they can't do it. They'll say, oh, I'm too tired. I can't pick up the pen. Or actually, I got to go because I left a casserole in the oven or something like that. All kinds of wild excuses will come up. Instead of them just saying, I can't do it because actually I'm paralyzed. Their conscious mind is protecting them from this really traumatic injury that happened to them, so much so that it's completely warping their reality. And that's kind of a scary idea. So although that's on the extreme end, our conscious mind does this to us in all kinds of different ways. If we're in a toxic relationship, for example, and we're stuck in cycles of codependency, or we're with someone who really doesn't treat us right, our ego mind is going to come up with all kinds of reasons why we're in a relationship with that. Instead of realizing that, oh, I didn't have a good relationship with my father, and I'm seeking out that relationship in unhealthy ways now with somebody else, our ego might pop up and come up with excuses like, this is the only true love of my life, or this is the only person who's ever going to love me, or if I'm not with this person, then I'm not valuable, blah, blah, blah. You can see all kinds of things. So to start to reprogram our subconscious mind, we got to get the conscious mind out of the way. We have to do this deep work. And there are many different effective ways to do this. One of the most effective ways, I might say the most effective way that helped me, was through the use of plant medicines and psychedelics. I think people have been using plant medicines and psychedelics since the very beginning of time to get over this exact problem of the ego. It kind of helps the ego dissolve. Some people call it ego death, but I think that's too dramatic of a term. But it helps us to kind of put all that away and really let the subconscious and the language of the subconscious come forward. But for people who are not in states or places where that's available, there are all kinds of different methods we can use as well. One method I've been talking about on the channel is binaural beats. And I'm probably running this idea into the ground, but I think it's such an easy place to begin to do this process that I always recommend it to people. Binaural beats are when you play one frequency in one ear, a slightly different frequency in the other ear, and that difference creates a third frequency within the brain that can put you into a theta brainwave state. The theta state is the state that the brain experiences right before you fall asleep. So as your ego mind is kind of starting to relax, the dream state's starting to come up. And our dream state is when the conscious mind is totally asleep, and now the subconscious is bringing forth ideas and images and thoughts. And there's all kinds of power in recognizing our dreams because they're trying to give us this ancient wisdom of our subconscious. But to reprogram that subconscious, we can use these binaural beats to put us into a state where, right before we fall asleep, the consciousness is out of the way, and we can start to work with whatever's coming up for us. When we get into this reprogramming state, it's very important that we have a specific intention for what we're doing. So we want to write down on a paper a question that we have or something that we're trying to figure out. If the question is going back to this idea of relationships, you can say, why am I in a relationship that is hurting me? Keep that question. Go into the binaural state. Relax the ego mind. And then allow yourself to feel, think, process whatever starts to come up for you from the subconscious while that conscious mind is out of the way. The subconscious wants to always bring us into a state of balance. If we allow it to express itself, it's going to bring forth all of the ideas and emotions that are trapped and repressed because it wants to help us. If there's bad stuff in there, it wants to get it up and out of the way. So try it for yourself and see if you have an effective experience. I've always put a link at the end to a nice little playlist that you can use to try the binaural beats for yourself. Another thing I want to talk about here that's very important and was very helpful to me is called internal family systems therapy. This was developed by Harvard psychologist Richard Schwartz. And within internal family systems therapy, we act like we are made up of many different parts within ourselves, like a little family. And we have our true self, which is our self that's never lost, it's who we really are. I call it the soul. But then within our subconscious mind, we also have all of these little parts. So Richard Schwartz, he developed this method when he was working with teenage girls who were struggling with eating disorders, bulimia, anorexia, and things like that. And he found that in his therapeutic sessions with them, they would always say something like, well, there's a part of me that feels good, but there's a part of me that feels bad. And he started to kind of nail in on these parts. And he said, well, tell me more about what that part thinks. And then the girls would be able to express, well, yeah, this part feels that, I feel bad because of this or this. And they were able to kind of create some distance between the part or that negative emotion that was happening and their conscious self, so they could observe it in a way that was non-threatening to the ego. And as Richard Schwartz started to dig deeper and deeper with these girls, he found that they had these very complex families of parts within themselves. And usually it stemmed down to someone would have what he called an exile part. An exile part is a part of you that was hurt or damaged when some kind of traumatic event, really negative experience happened in your life. And because it was too powerful of an experience to effectively process, maybe because you were young or because the stress was too overwhelming, that part of yourself, that exile, almost breaks away from your conscious self and becomes this fractured part that lives in your subconscious space. And then whenever there's an exiled part, there's also what he called a protector part. It could be a manager part. It could be a firefighter part. But this part pops up to try to protect the exiled part. So, if someone was hurt in their family in a really early way, there might be a manager part that pops up that says, okay, we have to be hyper vigilant because maybe someone else is going to hurt us in life. So we have to try to manage everything, be perfectionist, be always on the alert to make sure nothing pops up. And that protector part over time can turn into something negative, could even turn into something neurotic if that behavior is something that damages us. This works a lot in instances of addiction. So there can be an exiled part, someone who was really hurt, some kind of traumatic event, some kind of abuse or something. And then a part will pop up like a manager part. So whenever the bad experience starts to get close, you start to feel the feelings the exile might feel. These triggers happen. Then that part will pop up and say, well, I'll protect that exile and I'll do it by, abusing substances, drugs, alcohol, or whatever. And even though that's a negative thing, it's still better to the mind than having to feel the negative emotions of whatever's happening with that exile. So what you have to do then in this internal family systems therapy is to work with your true self and go into these meditative states, go deep, and try to contact these different parts within yourself. And you can feel the parts coming up as thoughts. You can feel them coming up as emotions. It can be a very powerful experience. And you have to go to those protector parts and ask them, would it be okay if I went and talked to the exiled part? And that protector part might throw up all kinds of reasons why you're not allowed to go there. Just like those people with the stroke who couldn't move one half of their body. And you have to say to the part, hey, I respect you. Thank you for protecting this part. Thank you for the addiction even, because that was keeping me safe from something even worse that the exile was trying to protect ourselves from. And if you can do that, that protector part, that egoic part might get out of the way and allow you to go and access that exiled part directly. And when you talk to that exiled part, you can ask it, hey, would you like to come home? You're hurt right now. You're stuck in this moment, this fight or flight response of this thing that happened to you long ago. And would you like to come back and live with me? Would you like to reintegrate into my system? And the protector part might let you take that exiled part back. It might not. And that's kind of this balance. But over time, you can go around, you can go to all these different experiences that happen to you in life. You can start to bring them back, bring them home, reintegrate. And in doing that, you get to reprogram your subconscious. So you get to go to all these protector parts and say, if you didn't have to protect that exile anymore, if you didn't have to do the addiction, what would you rather do? And what's interesting is that often these protector parts will tell you directly, like to your thoughts or to your feelings, what they would rather do if they didn't have the burden of protecting the exile in the way they were doing it. So instead of being, maybe working with addiction like one part would, or substance abuse, they might say, actually, I always really wanted to work out. And so now whenever you feel this pain popping up from whatever was going on with the exile, the protector part, instead of pushing you to substance abuse, will start to work with you and say, I'd rather go to the gym. Boom. Very crazy, but I recommend that you check it out. There's a great book. It's called No Bad Parts by Richard Schwartz. And this is something that can be very effective in helping you to reprogram your subconscious. I know that anybody can do this. We can change. We can start to live the lives that we always want to live if we can reprogram our subconscious mind, which we can. So keep following along, and I'll keep sharing more information every week about how we do this. And feel free to email me directly, tate@oversoul.life. And I'm happy to share any resources you might need and give any kind of feedback that I can do to help. I'm not a therapist. I feel like my experience is just to share the information and give you what you need so that you can move forward and heal your life and the lives of others and live the life that you were always meant to live. Thank you so much.